Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute is headquartered at Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission, Belur Math, Kolkata. It has 3 faculties at its Coimbatore off-campus, housed in Ramakrishna Mission Vidyalaya, Coimbatore. Faculty of Disability Management and Special Education, FDMSc. Faculty of General and Adapted Physical Education and Yoga, GAPI. Faculty Center for Agricultural Education and Research, FAR. Faculty of Disability Management and Special Education is the first off-campus faculty. The faculty caters to the educational and vocational needs of persons with disabilities. The main functions of FDMSc are: it prepares special education teachers by offering teacher training programs. It serves children with various disabilities. Creates awareness in public by organizing workshops, exhibitions, and other extension activities. The faculty prepares teachers in the field of special education in 3 specialization areas, namely visual impairment, hearing impairment, and mental retardation from graduate to doctoral level. Apart from the state-of-art laboratories, some of the direct service units which provide training to children with various disabilities offer hands-on training to the teacher trainees undergoing special education programs. The various service units and laboratories at FDMSc are: Center for Excellence for Low Vision Studies. The center's services include early identification and intervention to children with blindness and low vision, teaching plus curricular skills to students with visual impairment to mainstream them into inclusive schools, identification of visual problems through vision screening, providing rehabilitation and referral services to visually impaired students. Braille Production Unit. The unit has a printer with a capacity of producing more than 10,000 Braille pages per day. The Braille books produced contain tactually attractive diagrams made out of low-cost and no-cost materials. Braille books are supplied to more than 2,500 visually impaired children studying in nearly 100 inclusive and special schools of Tamil Nadu and other states annually. Speech and Language Lab. Children with speech and hearing impairments are trained in basic communication through speech therapy. The lab also provides advanced training in speech, language, and communication for children with special needs. The lab also helps the needy teacher trainees to attain knowledge, understanding, skill, and application about language elements. Audiology Lab. This lab provides a perfect ambience to teacher trainees to learn about various tests and equipments used for audiological evaluation. Sign Language Unit. The unit pockets the credit of developing and publishing the first ever Indian Sign Language Dictionary. It trains the teacher trainees in Indian Sign Language. The unit undertakes research in Indian Sign Language to develop Indian Sign Language dictionaries in different dialects and diverse traits. Physiotherapy Unit. Equipment for performing various modalities of exercise and electrotherapy are among the facilities available to treat individuals with motor impairment. Special Education and Early Intervention Unit. The unit assesses children with intellectual disabilities and provides appropriate early intervention and other rehabilitative services. It trains children in the activities of daily living, social skills, communication, functional academics, and play activities. Vocational Training Center. This center is gearing towards excellence in training students with intellectual disabilities, autism, and learning problems at various degrees and levels. The center has trained several children with learning problems and intellectual disabilities and employed them in different capacities at library, bookbinding, notebook section, and carpentry units. Sensory Integration Lab is to create awareness among the teacher trainees, research scholars, and parents regarding the need and significance of sensory integration therapies for children with sensory processing disorders. The teacher trainees are provided with hands-on experience to train the children with sensory processing disorders by using sensory
கீழே போய் இதை டெலிகாஸ்ட் பண்ண சொல்லணும். டைம் ஆச்சு. கீழே அவங்க போயிட்டாங்க, சாப்பிட்டாங்க. அவங்க காலேஜில் சொன்னதாக இருக்காங்க. Good afternoon to one and all present here. Welcome back to the fourth technical session of today's program. May I now request Dr. Chaumya Chandra, Assistant Professor, Department of Intellectual Disability, Faculty of Disability Management and Special Education, Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute, to introduce the resource person, Dr. Richard Rose, to the audience.
Good afternoon, everybody. I consider myself very fortunate for having got the opportunity of introducing an eminent personality in special education, Professor Richard Rose. Here it is, his brief biodata. Professor Richard Rose is a Professor Emeritus of Inclusive Education at the University of Northampton, UK. He has previously held posts as a teacher, school principal, and inspector in UK, and as a lecturer at the universities of Birmingham and Leicester. He has worked regularly in India for more than 20 years as a teacher, researcher, and consultant. In UK, he has served on government advisory groups and worked with organizations such as UNICEF, Savers, and the Commonwealth. He has conducted research for research councils, charitable trusts, and government organizations in UK, China, Malaysia, Ireland, Georgia, and India. He is currently supervising PhD students from both UK and overseas who are conducting research into various aspects of inclusion and children's rights. He is the author of more than 100 academic publications. His latest book, Establishing Pathways to Inclusion, will be published by Routledge in the year 2021. May I request Professor Richard Rose to deliver his talk on inclusive education, progress, and future challenges. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today and to have an opportunity to speak to some very committed individuals here who I know have been working very hard on the promotion of inclusion. I'm just going to try and upload my PowerPoint. Oh, hold on a second. Having a few problems uploading here. I won't be a moment. Hmm.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, could you please share your PPT, sir?
I'm trying to do that just now, but it keeps blocking it for some reason. It keeps saying security issue. Hold on, I'm still trying.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
I think we have it now. Yes. Can you see this? Hello?
Yes, sir, it is coming. Coming,
Right.
sir, it is coming. You can proceed.
Sorry about that. There seemed to be some virus check that was going through. So, okay, good. Okay, so let's commence then.
Oh, you
Hello?
can proceed, sir. You please
Yes,
proceed.
okay. Yes, okay. I'm doing that now. Good. Okay. So good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be asked to talk about a subject that I think is particularly pertinent at the moment.
Sir, excuse me, sir. Sir,
Yes. Yeah.
sir, could you make it in a slideshow mode? Please.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay.
Yeah, sir. Now we could see. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So it's particularly pertinent, I think, to be talking to you at what is a very difficult time for everybody across the world. And I know that, as in the UK, colleagues in India are very apprehensive at the moment and are struggling as we go through this dreadful pandemic. Normally, I would have been in India but this time of year, working with colleagues in many parts of the country. But unfortunately, none of us can do that at the moment. So I'm very grateful that there are organisations such as your own, which are facilitating opportunities such as this so that we can at least share some information. So what am I going to try and do in this session? Well, I think it's important that we start with some celebration. It's quite easy to become despondent at times like this. And I really think that we need to hold on to the positives that have been achieved in our societies in terms of the rights of people who have been marginalized, whether that be through disability or other causes. And then I want to move on to some of the challenges that I think we currently face. And inevitably, we have to think about not just what is happening during the pandemic, but what the likely long-term implications of the pandemic might be upon our role as educators and those of us who advocate for equal opportunities and greater equity in education for all learners. So we know then that there has been immense progress made across the world. And this has come about, we need to remember, because of the pressure that has been applied on national governments and international organizations like the World Bank and UNESCO and other organizations, by parents, activists, teachers, and others who for a long time have expressed concerns that there are so many children and young people who have been denied opportunities to education and to participate in all those aspects of society that we tend to take for granted. And we must applaud the fact that we've had many of these international agreements that have brought countries from around the world together to actually consider what the challenges are and to make a commitment to do something. I've put on the screen here just 3 of them that many people I'm speaking to here today will be familiar with. Obviously, the Salamanca Statement, to which India was a signatory, which was an important document right back in 1994. And I sometimes need to remind myself how long it takes for progress to be made. From 1994, we have the Salamanca Statement, where nations signed up in an agreement that they would try to recognize the rights of all children to have a basic primary education. That's obviously been followed by other significant documents. I presented here the Dakar Framework for Action, Education for All, to which again India was a signatory, which recognized that progress has been made, but it's been very, very slow. And of course, we have the Sustainable Development Goals. These followed on from the Millennium Development Goals, which were very aspirational and which recognised that there's a great interaction, and I want to say more about this interaction today, between many factors that impede the ability of people to receive their rights to a fair and just treatment in the societies that we've created. And the Sustainable Development Goals remind us that education does not stand alone. Education is influenced by factors such as poverty, the environment, by conflict, and people within our communities are still discriminated against because of things like their gender. So, you know, girls still are very much discriminated against in many of our societies, or obviously by disability. So it is important to celebrate the fact we have these international agreements. But of course, agreements alone are not going to change the world. And agreements need to be worked initially into policy. And I must say, in India, we should celebrate the fact that, as we heard from the previous speaker, there have been many, many efforts made to present new legislation, to develop policies that recognise the rights of children and try to address these in a way that improves lives for children, families, teachers, and the whole wider Indian society. When the right of children to free and compulsory education act, the RTE, came out in 2009, I think many of us who'd worked in India for a number of years, and many of my colleagues within the country, saw this as a landmark document. But we were also aware that it wouldn't be without difficulties. We were aware that it challenged the current status quo, and that some schools, maybe particularly those schools in more affluent areas, those private schools, which is of course a burgeoning business as well as education facility in India, would find this challenging. Many of us at the time also predicted that there would be difficulties in terms of having enough teachers with the ability to deliver this new world that was predicted for the Indian education scene. Many of us had concerns about the way schools were funded, the way that schools are resourced, and the challenges that this would present, particularly to some of those schools outside of the metropolitan cities. Many of us recognise, for instance, that there has always been in all countries, and this is certainly true in my own country and in other parts of Europe and the United States, that there's a huge disparity between urban and rural provision in education and health and welfare. And this has proven to be the case. The Act was in itself significant, but as you know, it has been the subject of much debate and litigation. There have been cases within the Supreme Court which have had to make judgments in order to see that certain aspects of this have been implemented. And I'd like to reflect here on something which I think is quite important. When governments pass legislation, if they do so without considering the needs of those who've got to deliver it, then they are going to meet obstacles all the way. This has been true of the RTE, without a doubt. I still hear many teachers who feel that the RTE has been an imposition which, because of a lack of teacher training and a lack of resources and a lack of understanding of the emotions of parents in some case, who are concerned about children coming into their schools who might take the attentions of the teachers away from their own children, then unless those things are addressed right from the start, progress is going to be slow. Now, I have to say, we have a new national education policy in India now, and I've had an opportunity to read this and to discuss it with one or two colleagues within India. And it seems to me that this policy is moving us forward from the RTE. It recognises the successes of the RTE and the discussions that were inherent within that document, but it's reaffirming very strongly a number of principles upon which education and social contexts should be further developed. It uses terms like respect for diversity. It also uses the term equity and inclusion throughout the document. But what really appeals to me about this document, which was perhaps missing in earlier documentation, is the emphasis upon local context and community participation, and involving local communities and people in all of the decisions that are to be made about the future of education in India. And that's something which I think, again, we need to celebrate. It's based upon fundamental principles. And these are intended, as it says here, to both guide the education system as well as individual institutions. Some of the statements that are made here are going to be debated, I'm quite sure, and need some qualification and some clearer definition. This notion of recognizing, identifying, and fostering the unique capabilities of each student, I think, is a very good step forward. But actually, we have to acknowledge unique capabilities are unique to each student. Schools are essentially learning environments where education should be prioritized. But if we look at education in narrow terms, those academic outcomes, which are so important, I agree, but which have become overinflated in the minds of many people, then we're still going to have many students who are seen as a failure within our education system. Incidentally, I do not believe that any children fail. I just think maybe as professionals, we fail to understand them and fail to meet their needs. But we need to recognize that being successful in the education process isn't just about passing examinations and gaining qualifications. We must, for instance, recognize that education has a role to play in increasing sociability, in moral education, and enabling children to feel respectful for the communities that they live in and the environment, and respectful of themselves and each other. These are not things that we tend to assess within our education system, but things which are important to us. So when the education policy uses terms like holistic development, I think it is the responsibility of every one of you sitting listening to me now, as it is for myself, to ensure that people think about this term holistic development, define it, and ensure that schools recognize that that is more than delivering an academic curriculum. At the moment, I think schools will struggle with this notion, particularly those private schools which are seen, and I hear this term all the time in India, as elite schools, where that notion of being elite is measured in academic terms. We need a fundamental shift, I think, in our thinking if we're actually going to move this agenda forward. So let's think about inclusion before we talk about some of the challenges and some of the things that have happened here. So UNESCO, I think, are very helpful in providing us with 4 key elements of inclusion. And I just want to say a little bit about each one of these. The first is this notion that inclusion is a process. I'm always apprehensive when I visit schools, whether it be in India or here in the UK or in any of the other countries that I've been fortunate enough to visit. I'm always apprehensive when teachers say, I work in an inclusive school. What does that actually mean? Does it simply mean that we have a diverse population? Or does it mean that every child in this school is learning to their maximum potential? There's a significant difference there. I went to a school not so long back, actually, in India, where I was told this is a highly inclusive school. And I did see children with cerebral palsy in the school. I had a long conversation with a girl with Down syndrome in the school. But when I talked to these children, they felt quite happy that they were socially accepted in the school. But for much of the school day, their potential as learners, I felt, was not being met. They were kept occupied, but they were not challenged. Education should be about challenge. Now, I'm not going to blame the schools because I think they've made an important decision to accept children that other schools had rejected. But actually, we need to recognise that inclusion is not an end product. It is, as UNESCO say, a process. It is a challenge. I taught in schools for more than 20 years. And during that time, who at the end of the day, I felt I'd made very little progress with because I didn't understand their needs. I couldn't find the way of getting through to these children, but I did try. And I think that trying is part of the process. We're learning all the time. Inclusion is something which is ongoing and which we need to keep addressing in incremental steps all the way, knowing that more and more challenges are going to come our way. So we have to see it, as UNESCO says, as a never-ending search to find better ways to address the needs of children. Having said that, of course, their second point is that it is about presence, participation, and achievement. Presence is an important starting point. We still have many, many millions of children across the globe who don't attend school. Getting them into school is an important starting point. But actually, putting a child in a school that doesn't want that child may actually be as harmful as them not being there in the first place. I'm not saying I want any child out of school, but we must equip schools to be able to welcome children and to feel that they want them within their community. Participation is the key to this. Children need teachers who understand how to engage them in activity and in learning. And that may mean that we have to change our pedagogical approaches from those that we've traditionally adopted to more inclusive teaching strategies. We need to actually recognize that the best teachers in our schools are those who are flexible and who can change their teaching approach, who can differentiate instruction, who can actually manage groups of children in innovative ways if we're going to move forward. And as it says here, achievement is also important. And I've already said, that must not just be achievement in an academic term. Inclusion is concerned with the identification and removal of barriers. Many years ago, back in the 1970s, when I started my concern in this field, much of the discussion was about physical access. Children can't go to this school because there's no ramp, there's no lift. They can't get from one classroom to another. The corridors are too narrow, all of these challenges. But when we're talking about barriers, we need to recognize that barriers are not just physical. They're intellectual, they're academic, and they're attitudinal as well. We need constantly to be reminding ourselves of what it is that we do that may either enable children to participate or create barriers to them being part of what we're trying to achieve. One of the best ways, in my view of this, is to actually ask children what they need. I often reflect, and I've used this example with my students on many occasions. The first time I ever taught a child in a wheelchair, I was in a primary school, and the child came into my class, was a wheelchair user. And the first day he was there, I'd been told by his mother that he shouldn't spend all day in his wheelchair. He should be removed from the wheelchair and put on a chair or seated on the floor for some activities. I was a young, naive teacher with no experience in this field, and I was apprehensive. The first time I went to move this boy, who incidentally was 8 years old, I was worried that I was going to hurt him. I didn't know how to move him. I messed around for a few minutes trying to picking up different ways, holding him in different ways to move him. And then he stopped me and he said, "Mr. Rose, what are you trying to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to get you from your wheelchair onto this chair here." And he said, "You don't know what you're doing." And he was quite right. And he said, "Let me tell you how to do it." And he told me the best way to do it because this had happened to him hundreds of times. His parents moved him like this, his previous teachers. He told me how to do it. I moved him. And then he said to me, there we are. It wasn't that difficult, was it? That was a big learning factor in the classroom. It's not just me as the teacher. It's the children I'm teaching. And in terms of disability, he was the greatest expert in my classroom, and I could learn from him. So removing barriers is about understanding how other people perceive the barriers to their learning, whether that's a disability barrier or a language barrier or a class or caste barrier. We need to actually be speaking about what it is that is an obstacle. And then the last of these elements, inclusion involves a particular emphasis on groups of learners who may be at risk of marginalisation. And here I've had many debates with colleagues from UNESCO, because I think what we mustn't do is factionalise things. We do need an understanding of the needs of children who have disabilities. We do need to have an understanding of the needs, for instance, of refugee children or migrant workers in India. We need to actually gain that expertise, but we need to actually recognise that many of these things are interlinked. And I worry, I have to say, about India, and I've been critical in this way before, and I make no apology, that within India, we have organisations that promote understanding of disability in a very factionalised way. So if we look, for instance, at getting qualifications in disability in India, the RCI, which is a very eminent, well-established and thoughtful organisation, have long accredited teachers as teachers of children who are blind, for instance. But why is it that we have all this factionalisation? Good pedagogy is good pedagogy. Inclusive teaching should take account of all needs and all abilities. And I shouldn't need a piece of paper that allows me to teach children who have dyslexia, but not to teach children with Down syndrome. That kind of factionalisation, I believe, is harming our move towards inclusive education. And I've discussed this with colleagues from the RCI, and I have immense respect for what they've done over the years. But I do think this is a critical juncture in the history of the way we address the needs of children. So let's think about where we are now then. I would suggest to you that we are shifting our balance gradually in terms of inclusive education. We start off in all our societies with theory, where we've thought about the rights of children and a philosophy of inclusion. So going back to my own country, it was only 1971 when everyone was in school. Up until 1971, children who were classed as, at the time, being mentally retarded or mentally handicapped, dreadful terms which hopefully we will never use again, but these children were the responsibility of health and social services and had no right to attend school. Through debate, through parental pressures, and through a clear examination of our attitudes about these children, then that changed. We started to develop a theory about why all children, including those with the most complex needs, have a right to education. And that theoretical debate is important, and it does continue. It continues particularly in terms of the social political influences and cultural influences, which are different from one country to another. And one of the things I would say which we need to debate much more about theory is what I would call the rejection of a culturally imperialist approach. Simply believing that the developments from one country can be picked up and put down in another is both inappropriate, is disrespectful, and is bound to fail. So I've taught often with teachers in India who've looked at models that they've seen from the United States, for instance, from Canada, Australia, and from Europe, and they've said, we want to apply this model in our schools. And that's good. I don't have a problem with that, as long as before doing so, you consider the cultural and the socioeconomic differences that exist between countries. Don't expect to simply pick up a model and apply it. You need to work at it. You need to change so it fits your local situation. Going back to the new education document, the 2020 document, we actually have in there a commitment to more local-based approaches. From theory, of course, we have to develop practice, pedagogical practices, for instance, mediating access, changing learning environments. So I do see great practice these days in Indian schools with teachers differentiating the curriculum, teachers looking at non-verbal communication, for instance, the use of augmentative approaches to communication, developing individual education plans that recognize how targets can actually assist children to learn more effectively, looking at innovative ways of developing group teaching. All of these things are important. And this is where inclusion is very much a process. And these things will keep developing all of the time. And it's important that we actually do develop these things. But it's also important that we share them with each other. One of the things that sometimes causes me concern is when I go to a school that have developed really good systems and I say to them, you should be sharing that with other schools up the road. And I have been told on more than one occasion, we've developed this for our school. If other schools want it, they must develop their own. That's not an inclusive approach. That is actually discriminatory in many ways. We should be developing things that we can actually share. Sharing ideas is how we actually develop new knowledge and we learn more. And the final stage of this understanding is the one of evaluation. We need to analyze what we're doing all of the time. We need to analyze both the social and academic learning outcomes of what we do. Simply putting something in place and thinking this seems to be working is not enough. We need to actually be able to show that it's working, to analyze why it's working, and to develop those approaches and share them and move them into other learning environments. And we need to use this data to improve all of our approaches. So this system of theory, practice, and evaluation is clearly influenced by a number of things. You know, the theory is very much about our beliefs, definitions, attitudes, and the policies that are put into place. And we have some really good examples of inclusive practices in India. But many of the practices that I see are culturally limited, dependent on the kind of conditions we see maybe in Western countries. The practice is often inconsistent and they're not universally applied. So, for example, I've been to schools where I see really good inclusive pedagogy in one class, the child moves to another class, and that doesn't exist because it's not universally applied and it's not shared. We need greater research and understanding, which can be quite narrowly focused at the moment. We need to actually look much more in depth at what we are doing in our schools, and we need to share and disseminate this both academically and within the teaching community. So let's think about where we are at the moment in this dreadful time. This report, which was produced actually just a couple of months ago, reflected on those impacts upon education that we're already seeing from the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that children have been very severely affected, that across the world, schools have closed, and that personal face-to-face instruction has been limited. In my own country, schools closed in March, they opened again last week. And already some of the schools are closing again because of increased infection. Distance learning has been developed, and I have to say, teachers have been very, very innovative in what they've done to support children. But we also know from reports that are already coming in from many organisations that the levels of stress and mental health issues in children have increased considerably. So we know that there are many, many difficulties caused by this COVID pandemic. And we know that some children are suffering more than others. It's exacerbated many of the inequalities in our systems. And to illustrate that, you know, it is true that all over the world, teachers have been really innovative in supporting homeschooling and keeping their students informed. The use of digital technology has been quite immense in many countries. In my own country, and certainly I know through working on a Commonwealth project recently, some teachers in India, some in Africa have been very good at using digital technology. As an example, in Nigeria, television channels given over entirely to education programs for teachers, for children in different age groups. And this has been good. We should applaud this. But although India has more internet users than anywhere else in the world, approximately 50% of families in India have no internet access. This is statistics gained through an Indian agency just a couple of months ago. 50% of families have no internet access and therefore can't access this innovation. Some of the schools I've worked with, for instance, in rural Telangana, have no access to computer technology. And therefore, their families are not able to access the learning which many teachers have worked hard to develop. Children who are dependent upon local languages are struggling to get good access. Unfortunately, the internet is dominated by the English language, and therefore that's causing additional problems to many learners. And families who have low levels of education, formal education, and low levels of literacy are struggling to support their children in home learning, and it's having an impact upon their confidence in terms of their own child's education. And of course, there are additional challenges for learners who have disabilities. We know that some children with disabilities are at higher risk of infection because of the comorbidity that exists in children, for instance, with conditions like cystic fibrosis, for instance. And many children are having difficulty accessing the support they require from health services. And in the fight against COVID-19, things like sanitation is extremely important. Access to good clean water, good bathing facilities, for instance, have been extremely important in the fight against COVID. And we know, for instance, and I was talking to a colleague yesterday about the risks being taken by ASHA workers in some of the communities where personal protective equipment has been minimal in some cases. And these people are fighting hard to support families who are at risk. And those children with disabilities are particularly at risk in these communities. So we know that the availability of resources and the current pandemic is causing a major strain for many children with disabilities. Governments are having to make difficult decisions. This document here, which is from the Alliance for Child Protection and Humanitarian Action, is a very interesting read. And it talks about knowing when it's safe to open schools. Safe not just for children, but also for teachers who, if they pick up the virus, of course, will go home and infect their families and also will not be available to teach in schools. Working out when it's going to be safe to open schools, how to do it, and putting the provision in place is very, very challenging. We're already finding in my own country, with schools that have been open just over a week, that some are already having to close sections of the school because of infection. In some parts of the world where the economic situation is not so strong, preparing a school effectively so that it's safe for children to return is very, very challenging. And of course, we're likely to be in this cycle of perpetual infection if we do things too quickly, but we're also in danger of denying children opportunities to learn if we are too slow about what we do. There's amazing impact beyond students too. We know from the research that's already been done that school closures have had an impact upon teachers' mental health. In many countries of the world, teachers' income has been severely impaired. And the new demand to shift into new ways of teaching, particularly teaching online, is causing us stress. Some teachers here in Europe are estimating that during the pandemic, the amount of time in preparing lessons for some teachers has been as much as 45 hours a week, and that's before they deliver the lessons. So we see teachers who are under incredible strain. We also know that parents and caregivers are struggling because some of them feel inadequate in teaching their children at home. Some of them have lost income because of childcare issues. And we know that some of them are actually having to reevaluate the value of education. We know, for instance, from reports from some countries that children have not just been out of school, but they've been used to supplement family income through basic employment. And the fear is that some of those children may never return to school. So we know for children from marginalized groups, those with disabilities, those from refugee communities, for instance, that social and economic and educational disadvantage has increased dramatically. It has been reported by the Global Action on Disability Group that as many as half of the estimated 65 million primary or lower secondary age children with disabilities in what they still class as developing countries were already out of school. It's estimated that that proportion is likely to increase significantly when the crisis is over. We know that migrant and displaced children, refugee children, for instance, the Rohingya population, for example, in Bangladesh, have been missing out on public health information because of language barriers, poor communication, not having access to documentation. And this has had a negative impact in giving misinformation about COVID-19 and putting people increasingly at risk. It has, for instance, increased xenophobia and discrimination against these migrant populations and the children within them. This has happened across the world, including in India. A colleague of mine working, for instance, in Uttar Pradesh found that migrant workers returning to their villages from the metropolitan cities, from Delhi, from Hyderabad, for instance, when they were arriving at their villages, were forbidden entry because the people in the villages have been told they're coming from the cities and they're bringing the virus. So many of these people have not been able to get back home, and that's having a negative impact upon them and upon their families and their children. So what is the future? After COVID-19, the world will not go back to what it was before. It will take a long time educationally to get back to where we were. Governments, including the government of India, will have to make hard decisions about the economic state of the country. Already, politicians in my own country and there, and Mr. Modi and your government, are making decisions based upon what we might call economic need rather than personal need. It's a very difficult balance for them to achieve. When schools go back, there's going to be a need to think about how those schools are going to be funded and supported, and how initiatives currently in place will actually be maintained. This is very difficult because there are still people arguing that those who have disabilities are not economically productive in the same way as others. And the priority will be, without a doubt, to get the economy of every country stable again. And that will take a few years. And that means the priority will shift towards economic activity rather than social activity. So our roles as professionals are going to become increasingly difficult. We are going to need to advocate on part of all marginalized people. And that means those of us concerned with disability must work with those who are concerned for issues such as disability or race discrimination, for instance, how we increase opportunities for those who are being discriminated against. We need to continue to gather data and evidence to report upon the situation. Simply saying these children are missing out is not enough. We need to present the evidence for what they're missing, why, and what the impact is. We need to be discussing across disciplines. We need to be talking to other professionals who work in our fields, other teachers, but also therapists, social workers, and people who are working in other fields of marginalisation. We need to increase partnerships between education and employers, because employers in the coming years are less likely to be well disposed to people who they cost them money to train to do the jobs that they have. There will be undoubtedly a backlash against employing people from our marginalised communities. And we need to provide plenty of examples of the positive aspects that people with disabilities and other marginalised groups bring to our society. So I've given a broad, as I see it, and as people here are discussing in relation to the successes we've had, and you really must celebrate your successes as teachers and professionals. And I've also talked about what I think is the current situation and some of the challenges ahead. But I know that the audience I have here today are committed to moving things forward, and have on an everyday basis working with the children for whom you're concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for a thought-provoking session. Honestly speaking, your experience has given more meaning to the subject of the conference. It was very clear. We have not received any query as such. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, lad.
Thank
Good afternoon, everybody. I am happy to introduce our next speaker for the session, Dr. Sudha Madam, Assistant Professor in Special Education, Faculty of Disability Management and Special Education, Ramakrishna Mission, Vivekananda Educational Research Institute. Here is her brief data. Dr. Sudha is working as a Assistant Professor Management and Special Education, Coimbatore campus. She has completed her PhD in intellectual disability, besides Masters in Economics and Psychology. She has 15 years of teaching experience in the field of intellectual disability. She has acted as resource person at various national seminars, conferences, and workshops in several institutions. She has published articles and other write-ups in referred national and international journals. She is the coordinator at the faculty. She has supervised and completed 3 MPhil and 2 PhDs. She has contributed chapters in books published with ISBN number. Recently, she co-authored a book on value education, curriculum for children with intellectual disability, which was published by Kanishka Publishers, New Delhi. She received Best Research Paper Award on her studies in learning disability in the year 2017. Her areas of research includes curriculum, assessment, intellectual difficulty, autism spectrum disorder, psychological and sociological aspects of educational and technology in education. She is going to deliver lecture on curriculum for children with special needs in inclusive education. Is it truly inclusive? Issues and policy perspectives. I request Madam to handle the session.
First of all, I would like to thank our management, Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute, FDMSC, for granting permission to present a paper in this forum, along with the eminent experts from national and international levels. Title of my presentation today is Curriculum for Children with Special Needs in Inclusive Education. Truly inclusive, based on issues and policy perspectives. I would like to offer my presentation to all children with special needs, their families, and those who are involved in educating and rehabilitating them. In today's presentation, I would like to talk on what is a recent trend in general education and inclusion in general classroom, limitations in existing curricula, and also policies and practices. What is the current scene of our educational system? We all know that successful achievement in the examinations provided the only means of moving successive stages of education. Examinations and standards dominated the curriculum and pattern of teaching. What came to be valued was success in examinations rather than the content of the material study. In developing countries have been originated from British or European sources and also from North America. India's present educational system was largely conditioned by the constraints and the compromises of the past. In India, the educational system operated on the principles developed in the United Kingdom, according to David Bain, 2000. And this scene, you all know what is happening with inclusive education and how it is in general classroom. So in the general classroom, general education teachers and special education teachers, they have to work together, and special education teacher and other support specialists, they have to provide instruction to students with the special needs in the general classroom. And placement is that which should be least restrictive overall. That is, students should be placed according to their individual abilities and needs. Despite many well-intentioned and initiated educational policies that have been adopted by the government, it shows that inadequate curriculum, poor funding, lack of interest in the education of children with special needs, lack of adequate personnel and equipment are problems which deter the growth and development of special education in the country. Now, let us look at the limitations in existing curricula. It is largely based on the emphasis on memorization, separation of school and community, exclusion of the needs of rural community, disparity in training and the actual need, and the formal education is the means to achieve socio-economic mobility. So these are the areas we are giving emphasis or stress in our curricula. Then, where is the place for children with special needs? We all know that their characteristics, learning characteristics. Okay, what is their characteristics in learning? So whether these points or these important elements which we have included in our existing curricula, whether children with special needs are able to follow this or not. That is a big question mark. There are few research already it is going on and already conducted many research on this area. Says that to meet the needs of children with special needs, research emphasize instruction that will enable the students to have meaningful participation. Okay, here is a highlight word, that is meaningful participation. As we are talking about inclusive education, but whether they are included fully or partially or physically, it is a big question mark. So whether we are able to give meaningful participation for children with special needs in inclusive classroom is still a question mark or doubtful. So the following content areas are often cited as most appropriate for the curriculum for children with special needs. We have a look at these content areas. First one is language. The appropriate curriculum should contain language, that is speaking, listening, comprehending, reading and writing for everyday personal and social use. So that everyday personal and social use, you have to stress it, right? We have included language that we all know, but whether we are stressing this point or not, that is very, very important. Yes. Next is mathematics. So when we talk about mathematics, it should be only basic skills necessary for daily living, right? So we have to focus, so that we have to emphasize. Yes, so mathematics here refers to the basic skills necessary for daily living. Yes. Next is health and safety. That is self-care, health and community living skills. Next is very important, social skills. That is acceptable behavior, right? That is also very, very important. How we could develop social skills among children with special needs through various, curricular strategies or curricular content that we have to see. Then career education, that is preparation for employment and leisure time activities. So this is also another important item of the content which we have to include or which we have to stress in our curriculum. Already in all the curriculum areas, all these contents are there, but how much stress we have given or how we are instructing or what is a transaction, whether we are stressing all these areas or not, that is the important question mark here. Yes. So when we deliver the content to children with special needs, we have to focus on all these important areas. Now let us have a look at the policy perspectives on curriculum. So here I would like to give a brief discussion on UNCRPDs, what UNCRPD is talking about curriculum and RPD Act and NCERP 2017. We will have a short look at these three acts. Yes. This is what Article 24 of which is education domain under UNCRPD. It says that state parties are required to ensure persons with disabilities have equal access to an inclusive education and lifelong learning process, including alternative modes of communication, providing reasonable accommodation, and training professionals in the education of persons with disabilities. Right? So this here you have to stress, where this includes facilitating access to alternative modes of communication, providing reasonable accommodation, and training professionals in the education of persons with disabilities. So this is what is lagging in our inclusive education system, right? Because of lack of professionals, lack of resources, and as I have told you, that the lack of interest in educating children with special needs. So these are all the barriers. Yes. Now, what RPD Act talks about inclusive education means a system of education wherein students with and without disability learn together, and the system of teaching and learning is suitably adapted to meet the learning needs of different types of students with disabilities. Yes. So this is a very important point. When we talk about inclusive education, so when we the general education curriculum, but we are following general education curriculum in the general classroom settings. Yes. So whether our children with disabilities are able to follow the general education curriculum or not, it is very difficult, right? So in such cases, such circumstances, whether we are able to adopt it suitably, whether we are adapting suitably according to the learning needs of different types of students with disabilities. Yes. So that we are doing or we are following, that is again a question mark, because under RPD now we have mentioned 21 types of disabilities, right? So whether we are able to suitably adapt the learning material followed in the regular education curriculum, yes or no, that is still a question mark. Yes. Also, it says to make suitable modifications in the curriculum and examination system. Yes, not only teaching but evaluation also. We have to give flexibility. Yes, we have to give suitable modifications in the curriculum and examination system to meet the needs of students with disabilities, such as extra time for completion of examination paper, facility of scribe, exemption from second and third language courses and all. Yes. So when we teach and when we evaluate, these points should be kept in mind. Yes. Now come to the points which is given by NCERT's learning outcome, which is published in 2017, that modifications of the curriculum is required because it presents specific difficulties. So whatever curriculum, general education curriculum, general school classroom settings, whatever curriculum we are following, we have to modify it according to the suitability of the child with special needs. That is the first point. Second is provision of adapted, modified or alternative activities. And alternative activities also we have in different content areas. Yes, that we have to emphasize. Yes. Then accessible texts and materials to suit their ages and levels of learning. Yes, this is also another hopeful point, that is according to the level of learning. Yes, according to their ages as well as the levels of learning, we have to provide the text and the materials to the CWSN. Yes. Then additional time and a suitable mode for the successful completion of tests. Yes. So we have to give extra time and a suitable mode for the successful completion of tests. Yes. Whether we are providing computer to the child for writing examination, completing examination, or all these resources. This is again a question mark. We have whether all these schools are having suitable materials or resources. That is another question mark. Yes. Next one is respect for home languages and relating to his or her socio-cultural value. That is customary practices. Then appropriate management of classrooms. This we have to check it out. Yes. Management of noise, glare, etc. And the provision of additional support by using ICT, video or digitized formats. So whether we are, whatever this NCERT 2017 it is mentioned, all these are their requirements, the requirements for a child with special needs. So whether we are able to provide all these resources to the child or not, that is again a question mark. Or how much we are equipped, right? So we can test ourselves. Yes. But there are few lines they have mentioned along with other rights. Yes. Other policy statements. Yes. The policy recognizes the importance of creating enabling mechanisms for providing CWSN or Divyangjan as any other child. Yes. Also, it says that disabilities will be enabled to fully participate in the regular schooling process from the foundational stage to higher education. Yes. This policy is in complete consonance with the provisions of RPD Act 2016 and endorses all its recommendations with regard to school education. So as it is, it took from RPD Act 2016 for the provisions of education for children with special needs. Yes. Also, it added one more point that while preparing the national curriculum framework, NCERT will ensure that consultations are held with expert bodies such as National Institutes of Department of Empowerment of Persons with a Disability. So this is a hope for all of us. Yes. So when they prepare the curriculum framework, they will include the expert from the special education field also. Yes. So this is my short presentation. So with this, I would like to conclude my talk. So based on the existing limitations in the existing curricula and the existing inclusive educational practices, and also the policy perspectives, the recent policies, which talks about the inclusive education for children with special needs, we can say that though the curriculum, that is the content, what to taught and how to taught is very important here. So though from time to time, various policies and legislations and acts are coming and going. So it is our responsibility to take up all these acts, and we should see that how far it is possible to implement from our level. Of course, we need support from all sided support we require, but then still we will keep on doing our work for children with special needs. Yes. With this, I would like to conclude my talk.
Thank you so much, madam. We thank Dr. Sudha madam for the excellent presentation. For the session was interesting and highly informative. We thank you, madam, for providing lot of useful information which helps us to understand the concept easily. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you, madam. Dear participants, the next session, that is today's the last technical session, will start soon. Thank you. After the technical session, there will be a paper presentation session. May I now request Dr. Chaumya Chandra, Assistant Professor, Department of Intellectual Disability, to introduce the resource person, Ms. Shalu Sharma, to the audience.
Good evening, everyone. I have assigned the hefty task of introducing a person with rich experience in the field of special education, Ms. Shalu Sharma, to the most enthusiastic audience. Here it is her brief introduction. Ms. Shalu Sharma is an educator, life skills trainer, and a design professional, most of which have been dedicated to designing and delivering programs for persons with diverse needs. She works with key stakeholders, parents, enterprises, and educational organizations to help develop their inclusive practice. She is the founder director of Evolure Solutions, a consultancy that works towards promoting inclusion. She runs an expressive arts center that promotes the use of arts for therapy and cognition. For 10 years, she is the head of Pallavanjali, a learning center for special need individuals, where she has developed the curriculum to be delivered as three separate ideologies to cater to individuals at different junctures of their learning curve. She is a trained instrumental enrichment practitioner and a certified drama for autism and music as therapy practitioner. May I request Madam Shalu Sharma to handle this session on training individuals with special needs for enhancing independent living skills in the light of COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you, ma'am. You can
Super.
proceed.
Okay. I would also like to just put it out here that I am hoping that the Wi-Fi will continue, but in case we have erratic Wi-Fi and something goes wrong, then I'm going to log out and log in again because, yeah,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
as we've been discussing in the past few presentations that I've seen, that one of the biggest challenges here has been erratic Wi-Fi. And give me a second. I am trying to just share screen. Hopefully, I should be able to do it. Well, I can see my screen. I hope others can see my screen as well.
Yes, ma'am. We can see your screen, ma'am. Ma'am, kindly make it in a slideshow mode, ma'am. Yeah.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Absolutely. You can proceed.
So yes, I have been watching a few sessions, and it has been extremely an enriching experience for me. I'm going to focus on a certain aspect of.
Ma'am, excuse me,
Yes.
ma'am. Sorry for the interruption. Ma'am, could you please click the hide option on the screen?
Is that okay?
It is okay, ma'am.
Super. So I would be focusing on independent life skills, and I would be focusing on an age group that is beyond the school years. So to begin with, I would move on to explain what are independent life skills. We've heard this word many, many times, and I have personally largely put it into four areas. The first area is of self-awareness, and We need to keep in mind that we are looking at individuals who are over the age of 16 to 17. So when we are looking at developing life skills and teaching life skills and imparting knowledge of life skills, it is beyond the curriculum that is taught in the schools. So we are looking at the first very important area of called self-awareness, where we talk about knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, being aware of your diagnosis, knowing your responsibilities, managing your emotions, having the vocabulary to speak, expression, so on and so forth. We are looking at social skills, which largely means your ability to be able to navigate your way comfortably in the community, within your homes, in your peer group, in your families, um, understanding what is the right protocol, what is the right behavior, etc. We are looking at daily life skills. These are more tangible and quantifiable. So we are looking at your financial literacy, time management, travel, navigating the internet, understanding computers, shopping, um, you know, day to day, the skills that you need to be able to comfortably use the resources that are immediately available to you. And last but not the least, we are looking at work skills or employability skills that are so essential for our community, for the young girls and boys in our community, to not just have a job, but then we are looking at a career growth. So, very consciously, we need to change our vocabulary from just let's get them a job for a career from them, because career specifies growth, career specifies your movement upwards, your graph is moving forward. So very consciously changing that vocabulary, that can we look at imparting skills to them that will help them um, get a job, sustain a job, and move forward in a job. And within the parameters of these work skills falls things like, do I understand hierarchy? Can I work with all kinds of people? Am I punctual? Do I have the rigor to work day after day after day? Can I take negative feedback? And most important, do I understand what it really means to have a job and to do it every day? And even if it's something that doesn't delight me or excite me or makes me feel that, yes, my job is my life, can I still sustain it? Because I need to do that to be able to live a dignified life. So, before the lockdown started around the middle of March, I was very happy in my training center. It's called Evolve Solutions. We had about 60 students on coming into the space. We were involved in internships. We had job coaches. Some were going to train in retail, hospitality, face-to-face talk, worksheets, books, travel, exposure visits. Everything was very hunky-dory, going perfectly. And suddenly on the 16th of March, we get the advisory from the government that all schools, all institutes need to shut. I am delighted to tell you that we were able to immediately shift within a day to an online mode. And in hindsight, I'll be sharing what was it that worked. We were able to just immediately shift to an online learning platform. And from March 16th till just today, it's been such a learning experience for all of us. And today I'll be sharing with you what are the things that have worked. How have we made technology a best friend? How have we made sure that none of the young people that we work with were just left out on a limb? And how were we able to continue imparting education and learning of independent life skills through the online modem? So largely, Evolua uses four um, methods of the teaching learning. I know world over people are using these same four, maybe six portals. We are using video conferencing apps uh, like what we are using today. We are using Zoom, we are using Team, we are using Skype and WebEx. Largely, we are leaning towards Zoom and Teams because I believe they really have good features. So using these conferencing apps, we are able to do group sessions as well as individual one-to-one sessions with our group of young students and interns. We are also using video chat apps It seems a little casual and not so formal, but for a lot of our teachers who were stuck in their native towns, they did not have access to their MacBooks and they didn't have access to their computers. So then we said, let's use the smartphones for what their potential is. And a lot of our students who moved back to their native places, they found it easier to navigate the phone to start with and then move on to the computers. So we do have sessions on WhatsApp and messengers, and we also use Google Meet. From the 16th of March itself, we also started going live. Till before the lockdown happened, I personally was little skeptical about social media and thinking it's not really a very serious medium. But the lockdown made me eat my words, and I now really believe that the social media is one of the most powerful, most open, most vibrant means of delivering education. And when I say live sessions, um, I think within 2 months we were able to deliver 60 live sessions, which were open to anybody who wanted to have access to the sessions. They are still available on Facebook, and these were all to do with independent life skills. We began from an audience of about 100 people watching, and the last time I checked, our last live session had about through the day, within 3 hours, we had about 6,500 people join in that live session. So it was very empowering. It really is a fine example of what open and free learning can be all about. And of course, we have made a lot of tutorials and videos where we are uploading it on YouTube, and they are available for this community to see. So using conferencing apps on your laptops, using video chat apps on your phones, going live whenever possible. It could be a communicative session, it could be a sharing session, it could be a teaching session, and of course, making very precise particular videos and then uploading them and sharing them. Here are some of the examples of how wonderful and how vibrant a group class can look. Um, I believe that we are well on the way to understanding the real power of technology. We use presentations to teach, we use discussions to teach, we have projects, we have the picture on the left shows a PE class. The students are using weights, and the picture with the jar on the side is a mindfulness class about gratitude. The bottom right is about understanding space and stranger danger and good touch, bad touch. And the one on the bottom left is about positive and negative vocabulary and how to communicate and how to get your point across and how to be within the structures of social communication and protocol. Some examples of how creatively we were able to use the Zoom as well as Teams to teach. On the left side on the top, you see a class on functional math. On the left side at the bottom is a class on work skills, on how do you plan and organize. So it's a calendar, and the young girl who's in class is organizing her birthday party and what all needs to go. On the right side top is a comprehension class, right side bottom is a collage making expressive art class, and right in the center is a higher language thinking skills class, which is on a one-to-one basis. So extremely effective on when you use one-to-one session. This is how live sessions happen. We can teach theater, makeup for our young girls, table setting, home decor, cup stacking, PE, theater, arts, craft, unlimited things can be taught, and you'll be surprised at how many people would be willing, so many experts willing to come and share their knowledge of what they do best with our community. I will now move on to transition. How did we transition from a face-to-face physical space situation to online platform? From my understanding, these are what are the pre-skills needed by the students to be able to switch to an online mode. basic understanding of ICT. They should know how to operate the computer. I'm not talking about know the formulas of Excel and learn to navigate Photoshop, etc. I'm only talking about a basic understanding of the computer, that here is something which can be useful for me. Here is the screen. I need to sit here and look and listen and learn, right? Then comes the how familiar you are with the use of computer, iPad, or smartphones or tablets. Believe me, our young population, whether they can read or write or count, doesn't matter. I can assure you, they all know their way around the computer as well as the phones. Acceptance of screen. They should know that the screen can be my teacher. I can learn from here. I can download. I can upload. I can type here. I can listen. I can participate. So that is a shift that needs to be made before you expect the students to just sit in front of the computer and start listening to you. And then at the end, some focus and sitting tolerance is necessary. And these are the ongoing skills that would be need to reinforce throughout the time when you're teaching them through technology. They need to learn how to navigate the teaching platforms. They need to know how to log on to Zoom, how to mute themselves, how to turn off the video, how to send chats on the side, how to share screen, etc. They need to have a system of communication. And what I mean is, we do have students in our whole group who are non-verbal. A lot of them like to chat. A lot of them answer through yes or no. For some of them, they have interpreters, but most of them are using technology. Some are using the Avaz app extremely effectively, and they are able to communicate. What is it that they want to say? What is it that they want to ask? How are they feeling? So they are able to get a communication system going. They need to understand what are the do's and don'ts of a virtual meeting. I think this is the ideal time to teach them that how you see yourself is how people see you. So when they see themselves on the screen, they understand that this is how everybody else sees them, and then they're able to position themselves properly. You can't get up, you can't fix your clothes, you can't sleep, you can't dig your nose, so on and so forth. So lots of virtual meeting protocol can be taught to them. And then, since everybody is home, personally there can be a lot of struggle with parents just taking over and just leading the session uh, for their young people. So you need to work at fading support. If you're looking at independent life skills, you need to start fading away the parent support, and then using cameras to take pictures, scanners to scan their worksheets, their assignment, and upload it, and then downloading and uploading. How do you download stuff? How you upload stuff? Because there's only so much you can do in a 2-3 hour session. After that, it's up to us as educators to empower our young people to really use technology with all its benefits. I will go over the techniques that have worked, yeah, that have worked for Evolure and for its team. First thing, upgrade. Before you start planning your sessions, before you sit down with your teachers, before you start rolling out your curriculum and your goals and your objective, please upgrade your Wi-Fi. One of the best investments you would make. Invest in headphones with a mic, most important. Otherwise, you'll be screaming and shouting, lose your voice. You wouldn't be able to hear what somebody's saying. So the first two things are most necessary. Also, please don't go reinventing the wheel. Lots of stuff is available. Now, YouTube is full of all the wonderful and all the innovative way online teaching is happening. So go online and look at what all is available. Join social media groups. Join groups like Free Resources on Facebook, Theater and Drama on Facebook. Download comprehension activity worksheets on Facebook, fun videos for teaching functional literacy. You'll be surprised at what all is available on social media groups, and your inbox will be flooded with priceless resources. And then sign up for the free resources. There are lots of websites where educators, parents, organizations have put in a lot of thought into having so much of online resource available to you, please use it. If it's free, it's for you to use. You've signed up for it. Also, I genuinely feel that taking inspiration is fine. Of course, plagiarism, absolutely no. But please go online and be inspired. There's so many wonderful things happening globally that you'll be delighted at the opportunity for you to learn and then be able to teach the same to your audience and your students. Get comfortable with what you look like, what you sound like, practice, enjoy seeing yourself on screen, because if you are uncomfortable and you're not comfortable with your body's presence, your students are going to get uncomfortable. So this is here for some time. Just like what you see on the video, and only then you'll be able to develop a clear speaking style. You'll be able to get all your energy across to the students that you're trying to teach. Keep it simple. Don't do complicated things. Don't present too much. Don't use vocabulary that you can't understand. Just keep it simple, one objective at a time, and do a trial run. If you're trying something new, a PPT, a voice clip, do a trial run. It will make it a little effortless. Please remember that when you're with your young people, this community that is now unfortunately just stuck at home, understand if you're taking group classes, this is the only peer group opportunity that they're going to have. So keep it light. Play games, do Scrabble, play dumb charades, do a scavenger hunt, sing songs. Tons of things you can do, fun things. Please include them in your planning. Don't have it all, serious curriculum delivered stuff. When you're downloading, when you're planning, when you're copying, when you're saving images, please be aware of the font size that you're going to show. Please be aware of a good contrast of colors so that the clarity is there, visually they're appealing and accessible. And do not use material that has watermark or logos across them. Not nice. And then please remember that at the end of the day, how you deliver the class is going to make all the difference. Some more techniques. This is what has worked for us. Make tutorial videos. If you want to teach them how to scan, make a short video, send it. If you want to teach them how to edit, make a short video, send it. Use your background. Keep it simple, keep it clean. If possible, invest in a green screen. Please go online, look at videos of how effective a green screen is. All the weather people in the news channels and all use the green screen. Please use a virtual classroom which has embedded links. So you see, and I'll show you the picture where you click on something and it takes you to another link, and you click on something, it takes you to another video. Students love it, and it'll make your life so easy. Another fun thing that I discovered was the Bitmoji. So I have my team members who've created these little emoticons and emojis of themselves. So they are little virtual teachers, and they like go around, they jump, they fly, they sing, they dance, all the things you can't do pretty much. And the students love it too. Virtual classrooms, I will just show you what a virtual classroom is. Use the whiteboard. I'm talking about Zoom, your best friend. So much you can do on the whiteboard. It's exactly like using MS Paint. Think beyond just putting a worksheet out there, because worksheet, you can send it to them later and they can do it as a homework or they can get it online. But your interaction, your energy, your style of teaching, your true potential as an educator shows when you use a whiteboard in all its glory. Amazing notepad apps you get, especially if you're using an iPhone or a MacBook. You'll be amazed at the kind of notepad apps. The latest one that I've used is called GoodNotes version 5. Fantastic. You can highlight, you can crop, you can put visual. It's like checking a notebook. So you check an assignment and you send it back with all your beautiful colored details. Use breakout rooms to teach navigating the net. Use breakout rooms for small group sessions. And my latest discovery is virtual tours. And I will show you what it means like. On the top left is a notepad. Yeah, so somebody send an assignment or somebody sent something from the web and you can change it. The second one in the middle is a doodle app. So you can doodle, you can make stuff, you can do all kinds of stuff. On the right side top is math resources. This is a virtual classroom, and if you click on uh, the desk where W is written, it'll take you to another link. If you click on multiplication, it'll take you to a multiplication link. If you click on the whiteboard, it'll take you to an actual whiteboard. And if you click on the teacher does some fun stuff. So this is all virtual classrooms using Bitmojis and embedded links, all available online, all free. So get online and start having fun. It's all free resources. On the right side, of course, this is I picked it out off the net, is a good use of the green screen. So just it's screen with the images flowing through. And that image that you see on the left bottom is a virtual tour of NASA. All free virtual tours. NASA has it, Disneyland has it, Museum of Modern Art has it, Paris has it. I think one of the safaris in Kenya has it. You'll be amazed at the virtual tours. So use all these resources that are available online. They are all free and they're all for all of us to use. The techniques while delivering a session. Get rid of distractions. Don't have too many things in the background. Don't have too many things on your table. Don't have noise in the background. Don't have the kitchen whistles going off. Not good. Use your voice. One thing that I have learned is I only have my voice to keep my students engaged. So use your voice. Practice using your voice. You're going to lose your voice after a few sessions. Get straight back. Keep throat larynges ready. Keep hot water ready. But use your voice to rope in your audience. Okay. And please be a role model. Behave the way you want your students to behave. If you are not making eye contact, you cannot tell your students to make eye contact. If you are like slouched or like that, your students are not going to listen to them when you tell them to have a good posture. Please be mindful, respectful, and sensitive to the student's home environment. I suggest having a white background. Yeah, on Teams and on Zoom, teach your students to have a white background so that nobody can see what is behind them in their house. You have people who live in a fancy house. You'll have people who will be in their native. We do not want to be insensitive in any way while looking into somebody's house. So have a plain background. Please use this opportunity to transition your students to the real life scenario, that the way you talk now is what you'll be doing in office, the way you navigate, the way you plan your to travel now online is what you'll be doing in the future. Use the opportunity to teach whatever you want to teach them. Don't wait for the pandemic to be over. This is a wonderful opportunity to really create global citizens. We are all heading for a world that is largely sitting around just technology. What a wonderful opportunity to teach our very, very specific community the wonderful way in which we can use technology, and then be flexible. Don't say for 2 hours you will just sit and you won't move. I mean, I attend webinars. I cannot sit and pay attention for 2 hours. So give breaks in between. These are all young people that you're dealing with. If they want a time to just move around and stretch, bio break, give it to them. Teach them that they can say, excuse me, turn off their camera and their mic and leave for some time. Take a walk for 30 seconds, 1 minute, and come back. So please be flexible. Understand that they are adults. Even CEOs and large organization people are sitting and texting on the side. Nobody can attend a meeting for more than half an hour. Yeah, we are into half an hour. So I'm going to take another 5 minutes and quickly um, wind up. Then comes assessments. How do you assess? How do you assess whether the students have picked up the learning or not? One is have a very, very detailed checklist of what you're checking. So the way I feel is best that you break it down into, are they following classroom protocol? Are they aware of online meeting protocol? Are they in control of themselves? How are their communication skills? How are they as a team? How are they functioning? So have a very, very detailed checklist ready, and then at the end of every session, just keep ticking it. What works best also is projects, that if you've done a project like we just finished our last week's uh, topic was disclosure. How do you, what is disclosure, what to tell whom, and when is it okay to say I don't want to disclose this to you. After that we made them some question answers, and we gave them as like an interview for their parents at home, and they were able to then come back and tell us what disclosure means, what are the things the parents were comfortable telling them, what are the things that the parents refused to tell them, and what does it mean to be what does disclosure really mean. So we spoke to them about disclosure under their employability skills, and then they did a project where we were able to then gauge have they understood disclosure or not, and have their parents really understood, because at the end of the day homeschooling has a lot of input from the parents as well. This is another fun thing, online scoring system. Students love it. Lots of online free websites are available. So go online, you can fill in the questions. It has a right wrong answer, and the students go online and they fill it, and they get this nice beep when it's right and when it's wrong. It's super fun. They love it. These are all free, all available online. Use notepads, I just showed you, and whenever you're correcting in MS Word, use track changes. Challenges, traditional mindset that how can I deliver the same quality of education online? Well, yes, we can. All those who've done uh, distance learning, we know it is possible. Inability to move from traditional worksheets to online resources, big challenge. Time. I cannot tell you the amount of time that is needed for this new system of learning. Instead of 4 hours, we now have to spend 10 hours because we are creating absolutely something from scratch. So, time crunch for the teachers, big issue. May how can you teach it? OT, how are we going to do OT? What are you saying? How can you teach art therapy through online? How can you do math? How can you teach money management? Everything and anything, even cooking. And we know that if cooking can be taught online, anything can be taught online. Unfamiliarity with communication technology, and the biggest, screen fatigue, that you get exhausted and you get depressed looking at the screen. This was the challenge for the educators, and for the students, pretty much the same. Also, outdated equipment, bad Wi-Fi, language barrier. Hindi-speaking people find it difficult to access the internet and get the relevant information because most of the information available is in English. So that has been a big issue. Then not being comfortable that this is also my teacher, and then not having a communication system. When we are face to face, even if we are working with non-verbal youngsters, we look at their body language, they're waving, they're nodding, and we can see the vibe that they're understanding. But that communication system sometimes has a barrier of the screen. So not having another way of understanding their performance criteria can be a barrier. And then, with all due respect, sometimes parents do not let us reach the targets that we wish to. And thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
Thank you so much, madam, for the wonderful session. You have covered a large area of independent life skills among persons with disabilities that leads to employment and in turn life with dignity, especially in the time of COVID-19. And your punchline, go online, that's great. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. So far, we have not received any query as such. If we get it, we'll mail you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It is a time for paper presentation. Now I request Dr. S. Parveen, Dr. Soumya Chandra, and Mrs. S. N. Amsupriya to moderate the sessions. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the management of Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute for permitting me to moderate this paper presentation session. Today we have 8 presenters with us, and we have few instructions to the paper presenters. Like you will be given 4 minutes time for your presentation, and then after the presentation of everybody, at the end we shall have the questions. So try minutes. Now, first, as a first presenter, I would like to call upon Ms. Yukti Sunil Gupta, who is Assistant Professor, Department of Special Education, SNDT Women's University, Mumbai. And her title of presentation is Teacher Education, Effective Use of ICT Integration in an Inclusive Setup. Welcome, Yukti.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm feeling very good to be back in my alma mater. So I'm glad to see everyone here. So I'm going to start with my presentation. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My topic for the presentation is teacher education, effective use of ICT integration in an inclusive setup. And now we have seen, like in this COVID pandemic situation, we all are talking about ICT and online classes. But at the same time, there are teachers who are facing difficulty in using ICT tools. So as now last session we attended, Shalu ma'am did talk about all the devices that we can use to enhance our learning and teaching process. So as per the UNESCO Information Communication Technology, it states that it's a framework for teacher, which states that the successful integration of ICT into the learning environment will depend on the ability of teacher to structure learning in new ways. Also in the researches, it is said that if as a teacher, if we are ready to opt for all the devices, all the technologies and ready to use, we will learn and we will be able to use it in our teaching learning process. But when it comes to integration, we all can learn, but then are we able to integrate in our teaching? So it is very important to develop socially active classroom, encourage cooperative interaction and collaborative learning when we use ICT tools. So integrating technology in education is a complex task at the same time, but ICT integration in education is a key element for improvement and development. So there are some researches which is which is explained by Kent and Core in 2019. Is a recent study which says that it is understood as a use of technology seamlessly for educational processes. So if we are able to use all the technology now, again, Shalu ma'am just said about the Zoom where we have the whiteboard, you all can demonstrate. So my study, like I'll be going to my sample size as well. So also other research has said that when we use ICT, when we integrate ICT in our classroom, students will be able to engage in interactive tasks. That is what our motto is always, we teach. So my research objectives for the study is to identify primary school teachers' level of computer skills and knowledge in the teaching learning process. And second objective is to identify level of primary school teachers' ICT integration in teaching and learning process in the classroom. And the research questions are, what are the level of computer skills and knowledge for primary school teachers in teaching learning process? And second objective question is, what is the level of primary school teachers ICT integration in teaching and learning process in classroom? So when we talk about ICT integration, my motto was to know how much the teachers know their computer skills and at what level they are able to integrate in their teaching learning. So the research design that I had opted for was survey method, and the sample size for 50 teachers from CBSE school in Mumbai and it was a mixed sample which includes both males and females. And the sampling technique was non-probability technique through purposive sampling. And tools, I had made a questionnaire which had 3 sections and which had 25 items in it. So now that as per my research, question number 1, it was found that in the first item, you can see in the bar graph that um, teachers responded agreed and strongly agreed when it comes to know about the functions in the computer skills. So they were aware of the skills, but at the same time there were also respondents who said disagree and strongly disagreed for when it comes to whether they are able to install software when needed. Now they need help, so they know all the functions once they are taught, but then they are unable to install the devices when it's needed. So as in the pandemic, we are opting for Google Classroom, Edmodo for uploading materials and assignments, but then they face difficulty until they are taught how to use it. The research question second was, what is the level of primary school teachers in ICT integration? So it was found that almost all the teachers responded as agreed and strongly agreed that they were able to use in their teaching learning process, wherein they were able to demonstrate once they were taught, they were able to demonstrate they were using different softwares to bring a successful integration and to be a successful teaching process. So the conclusion would be that it is very important and it's accepted as the to enhance learning as regards of diffusion of knowledge in digital age. However, still it is a problem in developing countries with adaptation process takes time to integrate ICT in education system. But at the same time, the evidence shows that ICT is playing a very important role, which aims to reflect critical analysis on ICT in inclusive education. When we talk about inclusive education, people with diverse needs, they require, because they do have different learning styles. So the knowledge and skills about ICT that teachers are equipped with will encourage teachers to integrate ICT into teaching learning process, but ultimately will increase the students' learning outcomes. So I would also like to give some recommendations. Now we need to enable teachers to establish contacts for mentoring, participate in networks, and access a variety of curricular and pedagogical models via technology. So when we give them chance to do, they will be able to do it, and they will be able to reach to their heights. Also, mainstream teachers should be provided pre-service and in-service trainings and resources so that they meet children's specific learning needs for the successful implementation of ICT in inclusive education. Also, the third recommendation that I would suggest is designing and implementing set framework, which enables teachers to promote inclusion of children with diverse needs. So it's very important to go with set framework as well as to know what the need is. So accordingly, when the teacher is able to integrate technology, we will get an amazing outcome from our students. These are my references. Thank you. Parveen ma'am, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Thank you, Yukti, for your brief presentation. So we shall have questions at the end, right? So now I shall call Dr. S. Sukumari, Assistant Professor, RKMVERI FDMSC, for her presentation. The title is Strategies of Positioning for Children with Cerebral Palsy in Inclusive. Over to Sukumari.
Good evening, one and all present here. Now I am going to present my paper on strategies of positioning for children with cerebral palsy in inclusive classroom.
Sukumari ma'am, we can able to see your presentation, ma'am. Can you make a slideshow?
Yes, I will start my presentation. Cerebral palsy, it is a group of permanent disorders of the development of posture and movement, causing activity limitation that leads to non-progressive disturbances that occur in the fetal or infant brain. That is, disorder can be prenatally affected, perinatally affected, or postnatally affected in children with cerebral palsy. The motor disorders of cerebral palsy are often accompanied by disturbances of sensation, perception, cognition, communication and behavior, epilepsy, and by musculoskeletal disorders. So these are the different types of cerebral palsy. In spastic type, the part of the brain affected is cerebral cortex, and in ataxia, athytoid type, that is dyskinesia, the part of the brain affected is basal ganglia, and in ataxic type of cerebral palsy, the part of the brain affected is the cerebellum. And in mixed type, the multiple areas of brain will be affected. It will be a combination of both spasticity and athytoid type. That is the first and second one. Cerebral cortex and basal ganglia will be affected in the mixed type of cerebral palsy. So, what is the need for inclusion for children with cerebral palsy? Because children with cerebral palsy need to be actively included, because inclusion is so important for the healthy development of any child. But for those who are at risk of exclusion, mainly the severely affected children with cerebral palsy face a lot of barriers towards their education, getting education in general classroom. So the teachers must be especially aware and informed. So cerebral palsy can be limiting, but it shouldn't be, especially in school where all children deserve to have the same opportunities. The same opportunities should be given as like the normal peers for children affected with cerebral palsy. So the teachers can play a large and positive role in ensuring they get those. So the teachers need to be aware of the issue and take active steps to help include those who are likely to be excluded. They can try calling on a child during discussion, assigning a child a leadership position, starting small and structured group activities and requiring all to participate. This leads to motivation to get included in the classroom for children with cerebral palsy. Now, these are the goals and principles of good positioning. It is mainly these goals and principles are set mainly to prevent secondary complications, and based on clinical and research evidence, it is widely accepted and common practice for the general goals of seating and positioning to include mainly to normalize the muscle tone, maintaining skeletal alignment, providing a stable base of support to promote function, promoting increased tolerance of the desired position, promoting comfort and relaxation, preventing skeletal deformity, and facilitating normal movement patterns and controlling the abnormal movement patterns. Managing pressure or preventing the development of pressure sores, decreasing fatigue, enhancing the autonomic nervous system function, that is cardiac, digestive, and respiratory function, and facilitating maximum function with minimum pathology. Moreover, adequate positioning facilitate eye contact, child communication, and social interaction. So these are the strategies of sitting position. It is a truly functional position for children. By adapting proper positioning for the individual child's needs, the child can be enabled to maintain a stable, symmetrical sitting posture, because they'll be having asymmetrical posture. So symmetrical sitting posture is adapted so that the child can use the hands for playing, feeding, communication, and learning. You should encourage the child to develop as much independent sitting ability as possible. So primarily a seating system should ensure the child has a stable base of support, that is the pelvis should be an important factor for positioning, and postural control and alignment postural head control, and different types of positions sitting, such as cross-leg sitting, side sitting, and long sitting, provide different amounts of support and stability. And floor sitting suggestions, the child can sit independently with legs crossed, sits with legs straight, not always bent because of beware of the contractures. Sitting with her back in a corner helps to keep shoulders forward and head level. Hands are more free to do something. Side sitting first one side and then the other. And these are some of the pictures of cross-leg sitting and long sitting and side sitting position in the right side and in the left side. Strategies in standing position. The standing position gives good stretch to the knee and hip flexors, some stretch to hip adductors because the hip adductors will be very much tightened in spastic type of cerebral palsy. So if it is stretched, it will be helpful for the children, and it allows weight bearing and gives a change of position away from sitting. This weight bearing is very important factor in standing position, and the standing position contributes as well to the development of the hip joint, preventing the risk of dislocation and pain, breathing and blood circulation, emptying the bladder and bowels, reduce stiffness, increased tone, and uncontrolled movements. And these are the possible standing positions. The children who are able to stand on their own can stand in the corner of the wall with independent standing, and who are not able to stand independently, with the help of the standing frames, they can stand. So conclusion, these are the strategies of different positioning of achieving postural control and normal pattern movement. Improved positioning pattern translates into improved classroom performance. And these are some of my references. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sukumari.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, I shall call upon Ms. Betty Abraham, Assistant Professor, Department of Special Education, SNDT, Women's University, Mumbai, for her presentation on practicing mindfulness as a technique for classroom management in an inclusive classroom. Ms. Betty Abraham, please you can start the presentation.
I hope my screen is visible to everybody.
Yeah, it's visible. You can continue.
Thank you. So my topic for this paper is practicing mindfulness as a technique for classroom management in inclusive education. I'd like to begin with just bringing to all of you what mindfulness is. So mindfulness is simply noticing what is happening right now, being aware of what are the sensations in the body, how is my hand placed, how is my body placed, what is my breath, the pace of my breath, how hard is my heart beating. There are three aspects to mindfulness: awareness, attention, and acceptance. And if you actually look at inclusive education, it also has all these three aspects of awareness, acceptance, and attention. So when I have a child with needs, different needs in the class or special needs in the class, I need to be aware of them, accept them, and attend to them to ensure those needs are met. So inclusive education, we've always had children with different needs in the class. We're now adding special needs into that group. They all have different needs that need to be met so that they can optimize their own learning. And so the onus now is on the teacher to ensure that needs are optimally met and learning is also optimized. So we come to the point which says that then teacher competencies need to be looked at and developed to enhance learning. The Wing Institute in 2020 spoke about four teacher competencies that are required to enhance an inclusive classroom, which is classroom management, instructional delivery, formative assessment, and soft skills. Why classroom management? Effective classroom management increases student engagement, it decreases disruptive behavior, reduces conflict, it makes good use of instructional time, it enables appropriate expression of emotion, it also allows for the supportiveness and responsiveness to individual differences and student needs. So we can see that with this competency, a lot can be achieved in an inclusive classroom. Mindfulness for classroom management. There's this one particular study that I would like to present. This was a functional MRI that was done for individuals who had done 8 weeks course on mindfulness. The results of the MRI showed that there was a definitive heightened activity and connectivity in the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus and other areas, while also showing decreased functional activity in the amygdala, as well as significantly showing that earlier deactivation after exposure to emotionally charged stimuli. That means the ability of the individual to calm themselves post being emotionally charged to a high extent. So what it means is that the higher level of functioning areas of the brain became more active, and the areas of the brain handling stress and strong emotions were less involved, which means the flight, fight, and freeze reactions were reduced. They were not so intense. How this translates into behavior is better emotion regulation, less reactivity, better performance on task. And all this we see when individuals practice mindfulness. There are two other studies, one in 2010 and one in 2016, which also indicate that practicing mindfulness can enhance attention, reduce anxiety, bring about emotional regulation, improve mood, and self-esteem. So mindfulness does have a positive impact on it, and the impacts are improved attention and focus, more effective emotion regulation, better behavior in class, greater empathy, perspective taking, better social skills, and reduce anxiety. All of which we said is what effective classroom management is. So definitely practicing mindfulness as a technique for classroom management in an inclusive classroom is will be an effective strategy. I would like to just share this thought with you. Mindfulness gives you time, time gives you choices, choices skillfully made lead to freedom. Thank you everyone for your time and for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Betty Abraham. Very interesting information that you have shared. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Now I would like to call upon Dr. Prabha Hariharan, guest faculty RKMVERI FDMSc, and Ms. S. Rupavati, PhD scholar, for their paper, Inclusive Education Assessment Framework, a practical guide to facilitate effective inclusive education. You can start your paper presentation, please.
Okay, thank you, madam. So the title of our presentation is, ma'am has already said it. So it's Inclusive Education Assessment Framework, a practical guide to facilitate effective inclusive education. So first thing, the inclusive education for all, the connection. So inclusive education basically originated as the best strategy to educate individuals, students with special needs. And since almost 2 decades now, the inclusive education has been promoted as a key strategy for achieving education for all and lifelong learning. Now, inclusive education, as we've been hearing through all the eminent speakers all day, basically it means the education of all students in the same classroom, and school. And here all refers to mainstream student community as well as students from marginalized communities. And the marginalized communities are those who are usually excluded due to ability, religion, caste, and or socioeconomic weaknesses. I'm jumping into another topic, that is the efforts that have been made up to enable the implementation of education in a successful way. So UNESCO has given these guidelines for inclusion in which they outline how inclusion should be implemented. At the country's level in the United Kingdom, the index for inclusion has been proposed and has been tried out in certain countries. The authors of this are Booth and Ainscow 2002. And in India, at the NCERT, the index for developing inclusive education has been prepared in 2005. Now, while all these indices are there, of course, the index that was prepared by NCERT is closest, of course, for the Indian ethos and Indian socio-cultural situation. However, we felt that there is some adage to this, which could concretize this facilitating implementation can be added, which is what we have developed, that is the Inclusive Education Assessment Framework. Now, what is this? It is based on 5 principles. These principles are gleaned and built up on all the previous work. This relates attributes to measures that can be assessed. Now, I'll come to this in the next slide. And the attributes and measures are delineated here in this framework at 6 levels of the education system. That is at the level of the educational administrators at the national and international levels, at the school system officials at the block resource center and the cluster resource center levels, then the school heads and school management members, which is more applicable for the private schools, teachers, classrooms, and the students. Then the role of the teacher educators and teacher education institutions, and very importantly, role of research. The principles guiding the inclusive education assessment framework. So the first is accepting the diversity among students and removal of prejudice. Then there is creating accessible physical and learning environments in the school, exploring and using appropriate resources to enable all students learn and participate in the class, organize and conduct research on various aspects of inclusive education and share the evidence-based practices, and reinstate the school as an agent of change. Now, what are these attributes and measures that I just spoke about? In this framework, attributes are characteristics of how the effective inclusive education scenario would be if we imagined it, and based on all the policies and principles and guidelines that have been given for this. And the measures in this framework are specific quantifiable features. Now, by assessing these measures, it would be possible to facilitate the implementation of inclusive education effectively. So with these ideas, the framework has been built. Now, this is the framework. It's a table which has a stakeholder on the left side and the specific attributes and measures for each of the stakeholders. So the measures go for every component of the stakeholder. Just one measure and attribute I'll take to just explain how we have thought through this. So an attribute is what a successful inclusive education should look like. So for an education administrators, they would organize a team of members for assessment of inclusive education in the district, state, and national levels. That is how it should be when this full inclusive education is working out very well. So what kind of measure could be there? That is, we would find or we would see certain teams already working on this and their duties are enlisted. So this is just an example, and the rest of this is the framework. Now, some important aspects of the framework. This is an assessment framework and it can be used at regular intervals like at quarter end or half yearly end to identify attainment and maintenance of the measures. It requires research for its successful implementation. And at school level, it is recommended that half an hour at least should be delegated per week or per fortnight during staff meetings, where the teachers and school heads would particularly use to discuss about accessibility of the classroom and learning for all children. In this meeting, parents also can be involved. Next steps in this framework would be first to confirm or corroborate this framework with a team of experts. Then plan stage-wise process with appropriate research design for small level application of the framework, and then make revisions to the framework and its application based on the evidence that's generated and feedback received from the participants. Later, the plan of upscaling of the implementation of the framework to the district, state, national level can be taken up step by step. So anyone who's interested can please contact us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. A new thing we got it, that is inclusive education assessment framework. It's great. Next paper presenter will be Ms. Apurva Panshikar, Assistant Professor, SNDT University, Bombay. And her paper is Use of CAI to Enhance Math Learning in Students with Math Difficulties. You can present your paper, ma'am.
Excuse me, ma'am. Apurva, ma'am. Ma'am, please unmute your mic, ma'am. We are unable to hear you. Yes, ma'am. Now you can proceed.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Right. So this is a research that has been undertaken by Formisha and myself. And I'm going to be just presenting this research on the use of computer-assisted instruction to enhance math learning in students with math difficulties. So I'm going to be giving a little background to our research, the methodology employed, the results, and the conclusions that we have been able to draw from this. We are aware that ICT is a big part of schools today, not just at the school or even higher education level. And we also are aware that there is student diversity, which is defined by multilingual, it can be religious, it can be ability-based. And when I'm looking at the school systems, I'm aware that there are many students who attend open schools. So we are talking about NIOS schooling. I'm talking about schools which offer Pratham curriculum. And naturally, even these schools which are actually open schools, they have student diversity. Many students with disabilities who have learning issues, they may have social emotional issues. And of course, even open education is accessed by those who require flexibility vis-a-vis the curriculum. Now, given these schools where even the Pratham and NIOS curriculum is transacted, there are children with math difficulties. And this precisely is the population that we were concerned with when we undertook this research. When we undertook the research, there was actually a lot of backing to why CAI, and there was ample of evidence to show that using CAI does work with children. But there was no study which spoke specifically about children who were so diverse and were attending schools which are open schools. And thus we came to our topic. The methodology that was used was an experimental study which employed the pre-test, post-test control group design. And we worked with 44 students who were studying at Pratham level A, which is like standard 3 curriculum that they were accessing. And there were 20 students from school 1 and there were 22 from school 2. And we followed the purposive sampling method at the first stage because we needed those students who were familiar with the use of computers and who did not have the fear of using computers. Naturally, even the school needed to have the computers. And once we identified the schools accordingly, we selected the students who had math difficulties as were reported by the teachers. And then these children, using random assignment, were put into the control group and the experimental group, which constituted of 22 students each, and thus the sample of 44. For data collection, we had tools for pre-test, post-test. So this was a curriculum-based achievement test, which was designed using a table of specifications. And there were 28 topics on 5 different strands, which included the meaning of division, the terminology of division, using tables for division, dividing numbers, and problem solving. So this specifically was a topic that was selected because that was a topic which was being taught in schools at that point. There were a total achievable score on this 28-item test was 54. For intervention, a CAI package was developed, which was the HTML5, JavaScript, and Flash were used. It followed the linear program using the drill and practice mode. Around 134 slides developed, including your introductory slide and the thank you slide. But more important is there were 107 slides which were focusing on drill and practice because that was a key modality that we were looking at. And the same 5 strands which were included for assessment for the pre-test posters were also included in the package. How did we go about with the data collection? We did the pre-test first, where we employed the CBET, which took around 45 minutes for the students to attempt. And a parallel test, which was developed, was given during the post-test, which was again for 45 minutes. The intervention was most crucial. The students in the control group, they were taught the same topic, that was division, using the traditional method, because this was being done in the school itself. And those in the experimental group were given an additional of 10 sessions of 1 hour each, which was through the use of the CAI. So they were also attending the school and where they were getting traditional intervention. And that's the only difference between the traditional group, the control group and the experimental group, was with regard to the implementation of the CAI as an interventional modality. With regard to the data analysis, the t-tests were computed and the effect size computation was done to know how practical it would be to use the difference if we find any. So paired sample correlated t-tests were done for pre-test post-test comparison for the control group and the experimental group. But more importantly, the independent sample t-test for comparison of post-test scores of the students in the control group and the experimental group, because this would give us evidence about the effectiveness of the CAI package. And what we found was that from the pre-test to post-test, both the groups showed a difference. And when the paired sample t-tests were used for the groups, the control and the experimental by themselves, we found that the difference was statistically significant at 0.05 level. The question, however, was naturally that, okay, the control group did show a significant change, so which means that traditional method is also working very well, as would be expected. The same holds true also for the experimental group from pre-test to post-test. So for them, the traditional method along with the CAI brought about a change. But whether the change could be attributed purely to CAI was found through the comparison of the mean scores of students in the two groups. So it was found that in the post-test, the students in the control group, their mean score was 26.05 as compared to a 34.14 for those in the experimental group. So we could see that there was a gain score of approximately 8 points, and this gain score was statistically significant with a t-value of 3.72 at 0.05 level of significance. And this t-value was also a large effect size according to the Cohen's d formula, where any value above 0.8 is considered to be a large effect size. Thus, we were able to find that the CAI did bring about a statistically significant change, which is of practical use for all of us as teachers. So in conclusion, the use of CAI significantly improved the academic performance of students with math difficulties studying math at the Pratham Level A curriculum, and specifically for the topic of division. But considering that it is a statistical difference and it is of practical value, we can generalize the finding. But from the view of inclusive education, this is what is most crucial to me, is CAI packages can be used as part of differentiated instruction or the UDL strategies. Because they offer flexibility and individualized support within their scope, they really are going to be supporting students who are struggling with math learning. CAI affords extensive one-to-one practice within the classrooms, that it reduces teacher supervisory time, so the teacher can then reach out to other children who require her support. And drill and practice mode ensures skill mastery, so there cannot be any child who has to move ahead without adequate level of mastery, be it at the fact level, be it at the computational level, or at the level of problem solving. So these are the set of references, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to present to you our experimental study. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. It's really an interesting study in the time of COVID-19. Online teaching, digital teaching, all these things. It was a really good and interesting study. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
I would like to call upon Dr. J.B. Desha, Assistant Professor, RKMVERI FDMSc, and her paper is on knowledge about the policies and legislations for persons with disabilities among teacher trainees, a survey study. Welcome, ma'am. Present your paper, please.
Thank you so much. Are you able to see my screen, madam? Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible. You can proceed now.
Thank you for this opportunity. So I'm presenting my paper on knowledge about the policies and legislations for persons with disabilities among teacher trainees, a survey study. So teacher, they are playing a vital role in the development of student in inclusive education. So we know that inclusive education, it is a system where students with disabilities learn together with their peer group without disability students. The success of inclusive education, it depends upon the knowledge and attitude of the teacher. It is very, very important. It is also important that these teachers should have a sufficient knowledge on disability acts and policies, and it provides provisions so that render appropriate educational rehabilitation and support services to persons with disabilities. So as a future teacher, they have to know what are the policies or legislations available for students with disabilities. So accordingly, they can help and they can serve the same. So the main objective of this particular paper is to find out the knowledge about the different policies and legislations for persons with disabilities among the teacher trainees, B.Ed students. These are the few reviews. The first one, Asta and Bhargav. In 2011, they have conducted a study on primary teachers, awareness on PWD Act 1995, and inclusion of children with special needs. The results revealed that most of the teachers do not have, they don't have aware about the Disability Act, and there is a need of in-service training to the teachers to proper implementation of the government schemes and RTR Act 2010 for the mainstreaming of the children with special needs. And the second review is Prashant et al. They have conducted in 2013. The study is about awareness of Right to Education Act 2009. Here also, the finding shows that the primary school teachers have very limited awareness on Right to Education Act. And the third one, Arun Kumar and Kritika, in 2016, they have conducted a study on awareness of RT Act 2005. Here also they have found the awareness level among the sample is very low. So based on this, the need arises for this particular study. The B.Ed teacher trainees get training to serve children with and without disabilities in inclusive settings. So to ensure true inclusion at schools and society as well, they must be aware about the policies and legislation for PWD. So it will also be helpful for the person with the disabilities to get equal education to achieve their rights easily. So as a teacher, what previously I've said, they should know a few information about these policies and legislations for students with disabilities. So the researcher want to find out the knowledge about the policies and legislation for PWD among the teacher trainees, B.Ed trainees. The methodology, a sample, 50 B.Ed teacher trainees were selected as a sample from the Coimbatore district by using purposive sampling method. A research design, survey method, and a descriptive research design was adapted for this particular study. A tool, a questionnaire, and the various aspects of policies and legislation were prepared by the researcher to collect the data. The particular questionnaire consists of 20 questions presented under two major headings, namely educational and employmental provisions of legislation for persons with disabilities. The findings and discussion from this particular study, how far they have knowledge about the educational provisions for PWD. The result indicated that 76% of teacher trainees were not aware about the educational provisions mentioned in the policies and legislation for PWD. Only 24 of them have aware about these information. That is, they have to provide compulsory and free education for children with disabilities. Coming to knowledge about the employment for persons with disabilities, it is observed that 68% of teacher trainees did not have adequate knowledge about this, and the remaining 32% of teacher trainees have knowledge about the provisions in the it leads to employment opportunity for person with disabilities. To conclude, it is important to know the provisions in disability policies and legislation for PWD. So to impart this knowledge, actually, Rehabilitation Council of India, RCA, and the National Council for Teacher Education, NCTA, has recommended the following two papers in B.Ed curriculum, General Education curriculum, that is Contemporary Indian Education, and the second one is Inclusive Education, to help the teacher trainees to get adequate knowledge about this disability related acts and policies, so they can help children with disabilities. But the research showed here there was a lack of knowledge about policies and legislation even after they are undergoing this particular B.Ed training program and they after learning this two paper. So the study suggests for organizing awareness program to improve the knowledge and provisions for these policies among the teacher trainees. Why? Because as a future teacher, they should know what are the policies or what are the legislations is for children with disabilities. So they can serve better for making a true inclusion. Thank you for giving this opportunity. Thank you, Ananda.
Thank you, ma'am, for your very, very, very informative research paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, all. Here comes our next seventh paper presenter, Mr. Gangadhar Rao, PhD scholar, RKMVERI FTMSC. He is going to present on a study of evaluation pattern for students with intellectual disabilities in regular schools to facilitate inclusive education. Mr. Gangadhar Rao, now you can start your presentation. Mr. Gangadhar Rao, please unmute your mic.
Hello. Hello, good evening.
Yes.
Good evening.
Yes, you can start your presentation now.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Hello.
Yes, Gangadhar Rao, please start your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Today I am going to present a small research study on evaluation pattern for students with intellectual disabilities in regular schools to facilitate inclusive education. So, as we all know, the evaluation is very important to know the student academic status, academic performance. So, to give a ranking, to promote next class. So, at the same way, the students with intellectual disabilities also require evaluation. Evaluation is very, very important. Students with intellectual disabilities in the inclusive settings. So, by conducting evaluation, we can know the skills and the needs of their needs, what are the support they require, so we can provide to the evaluation system. So, the teachers can conduct multiple measures tests, including standardized tests, informal tests, as well as alternative tests. So the main purpose of the present study is the determining the evaluation practices for students with intellectual disabilities to facilitate inclusive education by the general education teachers in the regular schools. So that is why the survey this survey has been done in a descriptive survey design. So it has been taken around 210 general education teachers at primary level. They are working in the regular schools. Those teachers are handling students with intellectual disabilities in the schools. So the sample mostly taken from the two districts of Andhra Pradesh state. So the sampling technique is the proportional sampling method and the non-probability sampling technique have been taken to select the teachers from the various schools. So the tool was developed research tool was developed comprising demographic information as well as the questionnaire. The demographic information is related to gender, age, academic qualification, professional qualification, and teaching experience in handling children with students with intellectual disabilities in their schools. So the questionnaire has consisting 10 items, including yes or no type questions, as well as multiple choice questions also included here. The questions mostly related awareness of the teachers and as well as the practices of the teachers on evaluation learners, adaptations, preparation of evaluation sheets, and simplification of tests or examinations and the implementation of the periodical tests, etc. The data collection has been taken, before data collection, it has been taken permission from the district to block level education officers. Thereafter, the data was collected from the selected samples by visiting selected schools to interact with the teachers, those are handling students with intellectual disabilities in their classrooms.
Excuse me, Gangadhar Rao. Could you make your voice little bit lower?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Now, is it audible?
Yes, pa.
Is it audible?
Yes, pa. You can proceed.
Yeah. Now, the results in discussion. So, the data was calculated by frequency of each question as responded by the samples, and thereafter it was converted into percentage to know the status of the teachers using evaluation practices in regular schools. The table is given here. You can see the total sample is 210. The mean score is here 3.84. The total teachers in percentage wise, so there are 38% of the teachers are practicing, that evaluation practicing they are doing in the regular schools, and there are 61% of the teachers are not practicing any evaluation practices in the schools. So I explained here, based on the data, there are 38% of the general education teachers who are following evaluation practices in regular schools for students with intellectual disabilities to assess their academic achievements. So those teachers usually follow simple worksheets to answer, model tests that conduct, they tell you to copy the answers directly from the question papers, and they're giving simple worksheets with pointing, matching, identification, coloring, etc. So the 62% of the teachers were not following any evaluation practices in classrooms to assess the achievement or progress of the learning outcomes of students with intellectual disabilities, due to the teachers expressed their view, their lack of knowledge and lack of skills on evaluation methods, procedures, preparation of IEP using assessment tools meant for students with intellectual disabilities. Also, there is no in-service training related to assessment and evaluation of students with intellectual disabilities. After the teachers expressed lot of time, they said they need to spend lot of time for the non-disabled students examinations, conducting preparation of papers, question papers, conducting examinations, evaluations, preparation of records, and all. So they don't have spend the time for the children with special needs, students with intellectual disabilities. Also, they express lack of support from the professionals, related professionals. This thing also they are expressed. And also, so while doing the survey, I noticed that from the main teacher, they expressed their view. They said the students with intellectual disabilities may get better education in the special schools rather than the regular school setup. So here I am concluding with my recommendations. So the government and concerned departments, education departments must arrange in-service training programs on assessment tools and evaluation methods meant for intellectual disabilities. Also, apply the special education teachers in regular schools to support general education teachers in assessment and evaluation methods. Finally, I am suggesting here, government must establish modern inclusive schools in various places with all infrastructure facilities, equipment and training staff of general and inclusive education field. Like there are number of schools, Gurukul schools, English medium schools, different modern schools, army schools, the community schools. There are many number of schools are established by the government of India. So as well, when you have to establish modern inclusive schools, where all general, disabled and non-disabled students can get education with the professional and general education field staff. So, thank you. This is my presentation. I am concluding here.
Thank you, Mr. Gangadhar Rao, for sharing your research studies with us. Our next presenter for this day is Father Baiju Thomas. He is going to present on the role of ICT in promoting innovative teaching and learning techniques for persons with disabilities. Father Baiju, you can proceed now.
My topic is the role of ICT in promoting innovative teaching and learning techniques for persons with disabilities in inclusive classroom settings. Introduction. ICT is an increasingly exciting vital part of the teaching and learning for persons with disabilities in inclusive classroom settings. It has enhanced several features in our life. ICT modification in education have indicates to academic institutes, administrators, educators to consider their role, teaching and dream for the future. ICT has observed modern encounters.
Excuse me, Father.
Yes.
Could you place your video mode of that cell phone properly?
Yes. Now it is okay?
Yes. Thank you.
ICT have been made known into the teaching learning procedure to enhance quality, providing curriculum adaptation and new teaching practices. In this method, it is likely to encounter the particular learning requirements of diverse learners group together with the person with the disability. ICT have made one of the finest extension provisions for the well-being of individual and the society. The role of ICT in the inclusive education. The ICT might enable access to learning which increases eagerness, nurtures self-competition and reassurance and enhances confidence. Inclusion is also about equal opportunity and access in terms of ICT. This comprises access to leisure and as well as learning. Schools make largest savings in modern ICT. ICT enhances the vision of teaching and learning process. The use of ICT in education has made the teaching learning process very motivating and relaxed for the educators as well as the students. Students have an eagerness to learn through ICT, and out of curiosity and concern, they learn well. Contemporary technologies are progressing into many resources of improving the teaching and learning preparation in the classroom setting. The vital role of ICT for persons with a disability. ICT has been recognized as a significant feature of the broader approach for PWDs. ICT is indicated as facilitating persons with disabilities to take part entirely in the social and financial life of their societies. ICT is an important power in relation of selected and opportunity for persons with disabilities. ITC proposes the old and the young like an opportunity to restrain social obstacles to collaboration and communication that can be initiated by the absence of supply for environment or lifelong preventive alignment. ICT and its impact on quality education for persons with disabilities. ICTs by their very nature are based that reassure and endure independent learning. Persons with disabilities utilize ICTs for education purpose turn out to be promised in the process of learning as more and more students use computers as information basis and intelligible output. The use of ICT in learning environments can turn to sustain several features of knowledge and its impact on quality education. ICT supports access to information and knowledge for persons with disabilities. ICT has now been recognized as the dynamic force and made device for nearly all advanced knowledge-based and skill-oriented progress, activities, and creativeness in all spheres of human effort. ICT in teaching and learning resources, creating the operative use of ICT to teach the focus matter in a more motivating way to mark knowledge, relaxed, and secure for persons with disabilities in inclusive classroom setting. Conclusion. Particularly, ICT has a better place in field of education in the coming years. ICT supports educators and learners to communicate and cooperate without restriction in teaching and learning. New technologies are provided and functioning stage for education in the extant time, which has facilitated the improved and well collaboration between the educator and learners. This has brought new possibilities to the teaching learning process in inclusive classrooms. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Baju Thomas, for presenting on ICT. Thank you all.
So, thank you all for your wonderful presentations. Yukti, I have only one question, not a question, but in your presentation, you were mentioning about the SET framework. So,
yes,
I think if you can tell the full form of SET, it will be helpful for the participants.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see the full form when I was presenting, but yeah, SET, the full form of the SET is Student Environment Tools and Tasks.
Yes.
So it's about like one needs to gather the information about the students and the environment that you want to set the ICT tools in, and then accordingly you decide and then you give the tools to the child as per the task you want to give to the child.
Exactly. So thank you. As such, I think we don't have any queries from the participant side. Anybody has any other question?
Yes, madam. I have one question to Apurva, madam.
Apurva, are you there?
Yes, very much. Yes,
very nice presentation, madam. The use of CAA for teaching mathematics. Actually, I have one doubt, but in experimental group, they have both the training, right? The traditional method and your CAA method. So have you checked whether when you are teaching this CAA method with your that particular group, those who have undergone this traditional, have you checked whether they have got knowledge about the division?
Yes, see, both the groups, we have taken the pre-test, and on the basis of that, both the groups, the experimental and the control groups were formulated after that. So they were equated. And if you also look at the pre-test scores of the students in the experimental and control group, there was a difference of just 0.09, which is statistically completely insignificant. So both the groups were at exactly the same level when the intervention started. And they were being taught by their own teachers itself. So there was no difference in the traditional method that was being used to teach them. Thus, the only difference was the implementation of the CAI for those students in the control groups.
Then one more question to you, ma'am. So on the same day, you have given the CAA or some other day? Apart from
No, No, we were not able to control that too much, but we saw to it that it was only 10 sessions because you know that this course, they do not give you that kind of flexibility at all times. So we could only control for 10 sessions for the students in the experimental group. So sometimes it happened on the same day, sometimes it happened the next day.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Most welcome.
Ma'am, I have one question to Disha madam. Ma'am, regarding your sample size, you have chosen 50 teacher trainees. My question is that you have chosen general teacher trainees?
Yes, madam. I have selected BA teacher trainees also are undergoing general Bachelor of Education.
Yes, ma'am. Whether you have taken both the first year and as well as second year, only you have taken sample as only first year students.
Both, ma'am, first year and second year.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to conclude, today we had 8 presentations totally. Out of 8, there were 4 research papers and 4 thematic papers. And among the 4 research papers, actually all the studies are very unique in its own nature. And among the 4 research papers, Miss Yukti and Miss Apurva Panishkar, both of them were doing on ICT, where Yukti was presenting her study on how the primary school teachers were able to integrate their computer skills in inclusive setup. And Ms. Apurva Panishkar, she was explaining how the CAI was useful in improving maths learning among children with disabilities. And another 2 research papers, Dr. J.B. Disha and Gangadhar Rao. So they were doing their research on general teacher trainees as well as general education, where Dr. Disha, she studied on the knowledge of teacher trainees on the policies and legislations of persons with disabilities, whereas Gangadhar Rao, he studied whether the general education teachers were able to follow the evaluation pattern. So from these research studies, we can understand that one side we can see that during this COVID pandemic situation, general education, teachers are able to use ICT very well in inclusive setup one side, and another side we can see that general teacher trainees as well as general educators, they were not able to they were not able to understand the policies, provisions that are mentioned in the policies, as well as they were not able to follow exact evaluation pattern. So there is a less awareness about students with disabilities among the general education teachers. That is the sad part here. This shows the current scenario. At one side, we are trying to push with ICT, and another side, there is still lack of knowledge among the general educators. And coming to thematic papers, there were 4 thematic papers. All were unique in its own way. Dr. Sukumari, she explained various positioning strategies, sitting and standing strategies, especially for children with cerebral palsy, which will be very helpful in inclusive setup. Very interesting session. And then Miss Betty Abraham, it is really a very new concept she has introduced, that is how to practice this mindfulness. I think Ms. Betty Abraham, I was remembering the book on Miracles of Mindfulness, which was written by, I think, Thich Nhat Hanh, I believe.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So it was really wonderful to understand, and if you are really going to practice this in an inclusive setting, definitely it is going to help both the teachers as well as the students. It's very wonderful new concept that you have introduced. Very good. And then coming to Dr. Prabha Hariharan and Mrs. Rupavati, again it's a new concept that they have introduced. Is in inclusive education assessment framework, which will be very helpful for all the participants. Once they start using such kind of framework, they'll be able to understand how they can further make the inclusion in a real sense. And Father Baiju, he has also explained about ICT, how this ICT can promote innovative teaching learning techniques, especially for persons with disabilities. I think all the presenters have presented in a wonderful way. So thank you so much, all the presenters. Thank you. So we shall end the day tomorrow. I think Dr. Dhanalakshmi, do you have any announcements for tomorrow?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, madam, for your wonderful coordination on this paper presentation session. Thank you so much, Dr. S. Parveen, madam, Dr. Soumya Chandra, madam, and Mrs. S. N. Amsapriya, madam, for coordinating and moderating this paper presentation session, as well as the paper presenters of this session. Thank you so much, dear delegates. Thank you for your patience listening. Dear delegates, all are requested to join tomorrow at 9:45 a.m. sharply for the second day program. Thank you so much.